top stories. Judge allows examination of ballots in Constituency 1. Cyclist ran over by truck in Guyana. And Israel imposes new COVID-19 restrictions after surge in cases. Hello and welcome to the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Today is Friday, September 25th, 2020. I'm your presenter, Shaira Flanders. Nationally, the High Court judge has granted an application to examine the rejected ballots for constituency number 1 in the June 2020 elections. This is the latest development following a hearing on Friday morning in the case brought by PAM candidate Ian Liburd, challenging the results of constituency number 1. ZIZ has learned that the judge has ordered that on October 2nd at 9 a.m. the rejected ballots will be inspected in order for him to verify the claim that of the 98 rejected votes, 60 were in favor of Mr. Liburd. On that day, in the presence of the legal teams, the assistant registrar along with the supervisor of elections will open the ballot boxes and examine the rejected votes one by one. The judge will then determine if each vote is valid after submission from the legal teams. Ambassador Ian Liburd was unavailable for comment this morning, but current parliamentary representative for constituency number 1, the Honorable Dr. Jeffrey Hanley, told ZIZ News, quote, "I am extremely confident that the result will not change," end of quote. In other news, the Social Security Board is reminding everyone that check payments for the September COVID-19 Relief Fund began today, Friday, September 25th. According to a release, payments will be made by check only. Customer service units will call successful applicants to collect their payments. Successful applicants must show a picture ID. And as we wrap up local news, the new board at the St. Christopher ANC Port Authority was introduced to management and staff during a general meeting held at the Robert L. Batcher International Airport on Thursday, September 24th. The new members are as follows: Damian Hobson, Chairman of the Board and Chairperson for Finance, Audit and IT Board Committee; Shannon Hawley, Chair of HR and Communications Board Subcommittee; Bernard Griot, Chair of Seaports Operation Board Committee; Orrin Hughes, Chair of Security and Safety Board Committee; Raphael Rodney or Fons, Chair of Airport Operations Board Subcommittee; Shirley Julius, Member of HR and Communication Board Subcommittee; Shermel Drew, Member of HR and Communication Board Subcommittee; Cassandra Matthew, Member of Finance, IT and Audit Board Subcommittee; and Azad Gums, Board Secretary and SCASPA's Legal Counsel. During the meeting, Minister of Tourism, Transport and Ports Lindsay Grant addressed the management and staff and spoke of the synergies that come with the new merge between the Ministries of Tourism and Ports, and reassured those present that SCASPA will overcome the economic fallout caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Staff allowances have also been reduced. Minister Grant confirmed that management and board agreed to a 10% cut in allowances as of September 1st. We now move to news on the regional scene. In this report, GTV's Esther Sobers explains that a cyclist was killed in a fatal accident in Guyana near the East Coast. Here's more in this report.
Police are investigating the death of 68-year-old Dina Ryan Lalchan of Washcote, Maikoni, East Coast, Zarara, who was crushed to death Tuesday after a rice truck ran over him. According to reports, the accident occurred at about 8:05 hours on the Maikoni Public Road. The truck was being driven by a 25-year-old. Both Lalchan and the truck were proceeding south along the eastern side of the road at the time. The truck driver told the police that the cyclist suddenly swerved into his path in an attempt to avoid a pothole, but the left rear wheel of the truck collided with him. Lalchal then fell onto the roadway and was run over by the truck. He suffered multiple injuries to his head and body. He was picked up in an unconscious state and taken to the Maikoni Cottage Hospital and pronounced dead on arrival. The driver is currently in police custody. Reporting for Channel 2 Headline News, Esther Sobers.
A Jamaican man born accused of shooting and killing 3 people of Chile Avenue in Rochester, New York, United States in 2014, pleaded guilty in the U.S. on Wednesday. Marlando Allen, a 40-year-old resident of Rochester in New York, was the triggerman in the execution-style murders of 21-year-old Jermilia Simmons, her 24-year-old cousin Jacqueline Simmons, and their friend 24-year-old Michael Nelson. Their bodies were discovered in a Chile Avenue apartment with multiple gunshot wounds on February 22, 2014, media reports indicated. Arrested with 2 others a few months after the murders, Allen was only found competent to stand trial back in March of this year by the Office of Mental Health. Following his guilty plea to 3 counts of second-degree murder, November 15th was set for his sentencing. We now move to news on the international scene. Israel is imposing stricter coronavirus lockdown measures after a surge in infections. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the restrictions are necessary to keep the country from being pushed to what he calls, quote, the edge of the abyss. Al Jazeera's Harry Fawcett reports.
Israel was already 1 week into its second COVID-19 lockdown, now with new cases nearing 7,000 a day and the health system issuing warnings of overstretch, daily life and the economy are to be restricted yet further.
In the past 2 days, we heard from the experts that if we don't take immediate and difficult steps, we will reach the edge of the abyss. In order to save the lives of Israeli citizens, we are required to impose full lockdown for 2 weeks.
That means all non-essential businesses will close at an estimated cost of $10 billion, with around a fifth of the workforce unemployed. The measure was opposed by the finance minister as unnecessarily damaging, and it's a hard sell to a public already doubting and in many cases defying the current rules.
I think the government is using and deploying actions that there's no medical agreement that are necessary.
I think that the government is completely dysfunctional. I mean, nothing that is related to the country, to the citizens, is in its priority.
The restrictions will stop the weekly anti-Netanyahu demonstrations in West Jerusalem. Political protesters will be able to gather only in groups of 20, no more than a kilometre from their homes. Prayers will be subject to the same rules, with the exception of the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur next week, when synagogues will reopen with restrictions. That's led to fears of further spread within ultra-Orthodox Jewish towns and neighborhoods, already hotspots of transmission. Netanyahu has been accused of failing to impose early targeted measures on such places because of the influence of the ultra-Orthodox political parties. And so with the competing factional demands, confused messaging coming from the government, there's been an erosion in a crucial commodity, public trust. A poll this week put support for Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of the crisis at just 27%. Palestinian areas have also seen high infection rates and sporadic government enforcement, especially in the patchwork of jurisdictions that make up occupied East Jerusalem. The man in charge of tackling the pandemic went himself on Thursday to the Shwafat refugee camp within Jerusalem but beyond the separation wall to find businesses open and people mixing.
When you look at the streets here, you see people without masks, though some are wearing them. It's not a picture you'd expect in a neighborhood with such a high rate of people dying of COVID-19.
Israelis have been watching the numbers grow with deepening alarm for weeks. Now they wait to find out whether this hastily arranged, much argued over, extra lockdown will work when so much has failed. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera, West Jerusalem.
Australia officials rescued just about 88 pilot whales after 500 washed ashore in the country's worst mass beaching. More in this report.
Australian officials have rescued 88 long-finned pilot whales, and they're preparing to dispose of 380 carcasses that were found in the country's worst mass beaching event. Nearly an entire pod of almost 500 whales were discovered on Monday and Wednesday, beached on the shore and sandbars along the remote western coast of Tasmania. Many of the rescued whales have reached deeper water. The Tasmania Parks and Wildlife Service said rescuers are trying to save about 20 others that have survived 4 days after the stranding. However, 4 exhausted whales had to be euthanized because they were past the point of saving, and it could have taken weeks for them to die. The Wildlife Service said that rescuers are feeling the emotional and physical tolls. As of Thursday, crews started preparing to remove the hundreds of decomposing carcasses and take them out to sea. A wildlife biologist with the Marine Conservation Program said they'll start on Friday, and it's probably going to take days to remove all of them. It's unclear why the whales were stranded so far along the shore, but some researchers think that maybe the pod followed a few whales who were sick or made a navigational error. For Newsy, I'm Johanna Grenaway.
And now for the weather. Current conditions are fair with a light breeze of 5 miles per hour from the north-northeast. Temperature is 33 degrees Celsius or 91 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds are east at 4 to 12 miles per hour. Seas are moderate with waves of 4 to 6 feet with swells up to 5 feet. Therefore, a high surf advisory remains in effect. Weather forecast for St. Kitts and Nevis says today will become increasingly cloudy with a 70% or a high chance of showers and thunderstorms. Tonight will be partly cloudy with a 40% or a moderate chance of showers. Sunset today will be at 6:04 p.m. and the sun is expected to rise tomorrow at 6:01 a.m. And that brings us to the end of the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more in detail. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your presenter, Shaira Flanders. Have a good one.